Come out and watch the Flyers.
Hello?
Mr. Snider.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm good. How you doing? I'm sorry
Great.
I'm late.
Oh, don't worry about it. Are you kidding? I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks for your time.
Okay.
Got a few questions for you just about... What I'm trying to do is really just paint a picture of who Pelle was. And, not only what he meant to the organization, but also to, the fans of Philadelphia. First question for you is, what are your most vivid recollections of Pelle?
Well, obviously there's different types of recollections. Recollection on the ice is that I absolutely felt that he was an outstanding goaltender with an unlimited potential.
Right.
And in fact, when I walked out the night he got killed, after the game that night before he got killed.
Right, the Boston game?
Yeah, I turned to my wife at the time and said, I think this is the best Flyers team we've ever had.
Right.
I mean, I just felt we were going to roll. And, of course, his death was a shock. As a person, he was just a delightful person, just always upbeat, always a nice, easy smile. He was very proud of his car, and I feel very remiss because we used to joke around about whether he could beat me in my car and all that kind of stuff. And, I felt tremendous guilt after he died because I felt like I should have been a father figure and somehow or other, told him just to take it easy. But I don't know that would have helped.
To be honest with you, from interviews I've done with other folks, he loved that type of thing.
Yeah, he definitely did.
The speedboat and the cars.
Exactly.
Just amazing. What was your personal relationship with him?
Well, I don't party with the players.
Sure.
But, my personal relationship was one of, I think, mutual respect, and he was just a very easy kid to get along with.
In some of the interviews I've done, many of the former players and also staff like Kevin Cady, Bob Froese, they've talked about not having closure from that day. Why do you think players are still so eager to speak about Pelle today?
Well, it was so sudden. No one could anticipate anything so horrible, and therefore there couldn't closure, really.
Right.
And, he was on life support when we all went to the hospital. He wasn't actually dead yet.
Right.
And it was kind of eerie because he was laying there, totally comatose, but not dead.
Right. And how early did you get there that morning? How did you find out about the accident?
I got a call from Bob Clark, and I, immediately went to the hospital. I think it may have been, I don't know what time in the morning, but it woke in the middle of the night, middle of the morning, something.
Right. What were your first thoughts when you heard that? Now, you probably heard there was just an accident, not knowing how serious it was.
Well, I heard it was serious.
Oh, immediately?
Yeah.
You knew it was serious. Do you remember what your thoughts were when you first saw Pelle when you walked in?
Yeah, just overwhelming sadness.
Right. Did you say anything to him? No. Let me see what do you think was different? Tragedy, not a stranger to the Flyer organization at all. What do you think was different or even similar losses of maybe Dmitry Tertizhny or Barry Ashby?
Well, Barry Ashby, was not a sudden thing.
Right.
And, it was time. There was time for closure. But as far as Tertizhny is concerned, it was extremely sad, but we had hardly gotten to know him.
Right.
And so there was not the same feeling of someone that you were really close to. Tertizhny was really tragic and horrible, really, really sad.
Right.
But I think the fans and everyone else had gotten to know Pelle so much better.
What made the fans fall in love with that team in particular and Pelle?
Well, I can't really answer that. I think it was a good team. I think Pelle was a colorful guy, and I just think that we have such great fans that they've really been behind us almost every single year with every single team.
Right. Now, looking back, I've done some research of the when Pelle first started, and there were a couple quotes from Keith Allen when he was the GM at the time, and the papers talked about the possibility of Pelle either being traded because he wasn't happy with his assignment to Maine, or even going back to Sweden. How close was that to reality?
Say that again now, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. When Pelle was sent to Maine, he wasn't happy with being in the AHL. And some of the papers were that Pelle might be part of a big trade, or he might be going back to Sweden because he wasn't happy being in the minors. How close was that to reality?
That wasn't close at all. Just newspaper stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
So you guys knew that he was the goaltender?
We knew that he was the goaltender of the future, but we wanted him to get a little more seasoning. We had a situation where we didn't have to rush him along.
Right. Now, as far as other goaltenders, again, this probably is newspaper stuff, but Bob Froese and Pete Peters, a lot of people thought those folks were goaltenders of the future. How did you know there was a difference with Pelle?
Well, basically, I really take my cue from the hockey people, you know what I mean?
Sure.
I am not so well versed in the nuances that I know that someone is the future unless I've talked to, Bob Clark and all of our people.
Right.
And it was just the general consensus of all of our hockey people based on having watched him when he played, in Sweden, and watching him in the minor leagues on a regular basis, which I didn't see.
Right.
And we just sort of knew that we had somebody who had that extra special something.
Right. Now, during the 83-84 season, he had rough times. He was sent down to Springfield. What caused those rough times?
Something, my memory's not that good, but all goalies have their rough times. Bernie Perron had his rough times.
Right.
Bernie Perron, everyone knew had something special and was going to be a goaltender, but when in his early years with us, it didn't materialize, and we even traded him to Toronto.
Right.
And when he got involved and he met Jacques Plante, and Jacques Plante worked with him, Bernie became a really good goaltender, but even so, he had his rough times from time to time. There's no goalie that has not gone through rough times.
Right. So you think that also Jacques Plante was a tutor for Lindbergh and Froese at one time, is that right?
Yeah.
So that was probably really helpful for him.
Of course.
And then, of course, Bernie Perron was his mentor after that. How much of a difference did it have Bernie Perron around with Pelle?
It made a big difference. I mean, it isn't so much the fact that Bernie Perron's going to teach Pelle how to play goal, but they're talking to someone who understands their issues and problems, and also someone who can help them with the nuances of the game.
Right. Right. Now, I know that you thought, as you left the Spectrum that night, that the Flyers were going to win the Stanley Cup that year. I mean, you
really did.
Oh, they were phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, they were dismantling everybody.
Right.
Now, when that year you think they're going to win the Cup, had Pelle not been in the accident, how different would it be now?
Who knows? There's so many ifs in sports.
Sure.
I mean, when we won the 2 Cups, if Bernie Perron hadn't gotten injured, I think we would have won at least 4.
Wow.
I mean, finals without Perron the next year against a great Montreal team. And I think we lost every game by about 1 goal.
That's right, yeah.
And that 1 goal would have been the difference with Bernie in the net. Bernie, when he won the Cups for us, was probably the best goaltender I've ever seen. I mean, he had shutouts in both wins for the Cup. The 1-0 shutout against Boston, against Bobby Orr and Phil Esposito and all of those guys, was the best goaltending I've ever seen in my life, under the most tremendous pressure you can imagine, because if we had to go back to Boston, I don't think we would have won. So the bottom line is, there was nobody better than Bernie, and we lost him for all intents and purposes. He was never the same again after those injuries.
Right.
And we didn't even have him in year 3, and we still went to the finals. We would have without question with Bernie.
Yeah,
maybe at least 4. So
wow.
when you talk about Pelle, who knows? I mean, we never got to that point. We didn't win a cup. So we can't predict what we would have done because we don't know what we would have done initially.
Right.
With Bernie, I can predict it because I know what. So it's you can project, but you certainly can't say with any certainty that we would have done anything.
Did you think Pelle had hit the pinnacle, or do you think he was still on the rise at that point?
He was young. He was on the rise.
26.
Yeah, he hadn't reached his pinnacle by far.
Because that 1984-85 is absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
Night in and night out.
Exactly.
Now, going into that season, what were your feelings? You're coming off that 3-game sweep to the Capitals the year before. All young kids, got a first-year coach, first-year general manager.
Yeah.
What were your expectations going into that season?
Well, we didn't have a lot of kids.
Right.
And we didn't know what the coach would do. But we thought, that he was an outstanding coach at every level that he'd ever been at. But we certainly didn't think that he could accomplish what he accomplished in that year, going in.
Best record overall.
Yeah.
Now, going into that season, now as you go through that season, you're getting close to division title. You clinched the division title. Now you're heading into the playoffs. What are you thinking at that point?
Well, now, you've seen what we've done, during the year, and you're just hoping for the best. I wasn't really thinking Stanley Cup. We have got great young kids, and we've got a great future ahead of us.
Right, so the expectations were at least a deeper playoff run than the year before, kind of build on it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now you get past Quebec, and you're headed into the Stanley Cup Finals. How you feeling? Yeah, you're facing the Edmonton Oilers, maybe the best assembly of hockey. What were your expectations then?
Something? I don't know that I had expectations. I was just loving it. It was just totally unexpected, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful time.
And then when you took Game 1, I know the whole city was.
Yeah.
I lived in South Philadelphia, and it was. Everybody was just going crazy. It was an amazing time.
Exactly.
So now you're going into the 85-86 season. You're thinking Stanley Cup.
Yep.
Yeah. And then, again, going back to that game in Boston, it looked like that was, here we are. We're headed for it.
Yeah.
And I've talked to Bob Froese that he thought he was going to be traded to L.A., and that trade was probably going to happen during the week after Pelle's accident. How true were those rumors?
Something, I don't think they were true at all, but the bottom line is, quite frankly, I don't even remember.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. The 86 playoffs, you go in against the New York Rangers. What was the main reason for the loss to the Rangers? Was it the emotional strain from the season, or was it that you ran into a hot John Van Beesbrook?
Well, I think, it was a combination of a lot of factors. I think that basically contained their emotions through the regular season, and I don't think that was really taking a toll at that time. It was just the way the games went. I mean, I don't really think that the death of Pelle had any effect on the playoffs.
Now, it had Rangers, even without Pelle Lindbergh on the team, with Bob Froese as the goaltender. Do you think that you still would have had the shot to win the Cup?
Well, I think you always have a shot. The breaks have to go your way. I mean, I think that Bob Froese was a very good goaltender. I think there's very good and there's and I think that the difference between excellent and very good can mean the difference, just like it did, as I said, in year 3 after the 2 cups.
Right. So you're saying like when Wayne Stevenson was the goaltender versus when
Perron.
Yeah, Perron.
There's no question in my mind that that would have been a big difference. Perron wouldn't have allowed that to happen.
Yeah.
And that's not a knock on anybody. It's just the fact that some guys are better than others. It's just like when you look at Peter Forsberg, everybody knows he's the best player on the ice when he's on the ice.
Yeah, he really is.
That doesn't mean the other.
No, absolutely.
And so all I'm saying, I don't want to put a knock on Froese or Stevenson. They were very good goaltenders, but they weren't at the level of Bernie Perron, or Pelle.
And Bob Froese actually said that. He said that Pelle Lindbergh was the thoroughbred. He said he was the guy that you had to go with.
Exactly right.
So, how difficult was it for you to manage keeping the team's emotions at that time? You're the head of the team at that point, and even today, and how difficult was that for you?
Well, the point is that I sit up in my ivory tower, you know what I mean? The day-to-day activities with the team are basically the primarily responsible of the coach.
Right.
And Mike Keenan had the job to keep the guys balanced, and most of it fell on his shoulders.
How difficult do you think it was for him, and did he confide in you that this is,
Well, we had discussions, but it's extremely difficult. I mean,
they were kids.
They were kids. I mean, it was difficult for the entire organization, and I think under the circumstances, Mike did a tremendous job.
Yeah, it was fantastic. They've been played on Tuesday instead of Thursday. Would you have considered not playing?
Well, I don't really know. What's the difference between Tuesday and Thursday?
Well, the difference is the accident is so fresh at that point. I mean, you had a few days to kind of collect your thoughts. I mean, with that accident happening,
you're asking me questions I can't answer. I mean, I have no idea what we would have done.
Okay, fair enough. That Thursday game, that had to be one of the toughest times for the Flyers to play, I would guess. And I know that that you guys considered it first, so it would seem, facilitate more normalcy.
Say it again now.
Oh, the memorial service. I know that as a team, you guys had decided that you were going to do it, but you weren't sure at first. Is that right? That the organization wasn't sure if they should have him.
No, I don't think that's right.
Okay, because there was a report about that in the papers that the team wasn't sure that that would help facilitate normalcy. We would try to get back to,
I don't know what people on the team were thinking, but I know that as the owner of the team, there was never any question in my mind.
Right. Pelle was close to the trainers. I've talked to Kevin Cady. I've talked to Sudsy Settlemyre. Who else was he close with the team? I mean, I know he wasn't close with other goaltenders as much.
I don't really know.
Not sure?
No.
Okay. What sticks with you most today about the loss of Pelle?
What sticks with me today?
Yeah.
Well, the bottom line is that he was a major part of our organization for a short period of time, and I feel very sad that it really, and his family, and just, whenever I think about it, it's just sad.
Right. How has it changed you as a person, his loss?
Well, I drive more carefully. But I mean, I don't know how to answer.
Has it changed you as the leader of the Flyers team? How you interact with players, or?
Not really. I still interact the same way. But if I ever heard of anybody with a hot rod car that was speeding around, I would call them aside and say, "Do you want the same thing to happen to you that happened to Pelle?" I really years since, but I certainly would change my approach.
Right. That makes sense. Did that team in particular, the way they went out, partied, or the way the drinking aspect, did that change after the accident?
Now, see, you're asking me things as an owner. I'd be the last.
I didn't even hear through the grapevine.
No, I mean, the bottom line is you just don't hear those kinds of things.
They try to keep that away from me.
It's just not an everyday, I mean,
Sure.
Like right now, I don't know what the guys are doing. Right
Really?
this very minute. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah. I mean, in the old days, when I was younger, and I knew that some night when we weren't playing, I'd go over to Rexy's bar in New Jersey, and I'd find them all. Those were different kinds of days. In those days, guys smoked, drank, came to camp out of condition. Training camp was the time where they would get into condition.
Now, was it that much different in the 80s versus the 70s?
It had started to change in the 80s, and progress was continually made, right on up until today. But, it just was a different world in the 70s.
Wow. or Chastain before and after the accident? I mean, did you know them before the accident?
Yeah. Well, I didn't know the family as well.
Sure.
I knew her very well, and she was, very active as his girlfriend and fiance, and we had a lot of parties, cream parties, and other get-togethers for the wives with the Flyers wives thing, and so I did know her very well, and I just felt very bad.
Is she stayed around for a while afterwards? I guess.
Just for a little while, I think.
And was party still the first year?
Yeah.
Yeah, that must have been unbelievably difficult.
Yeah.
What helped you, or who helped you most get through that 85-86 season?
Well, how old are you?
30.
30?
Yep.
I'm 72.
Right.
And I've had people close to me die. And it's a very sad thing, but you learn that you just have to put it behind you, and you honor the people, but they want you, and you have to go on with your life. So basically work hard, and you have your goals, and you don't put it in the forefront of your mind on an everyday basis.